"This is Tiffany," my mother-in-law announced, her voice ringing out through the microphone, amplifying her cruelty for the 50 guests gathered in our backyard. The feedback from the speakers screeched for a second, but it was nothing compared to the pain slicing through my chest. "She is 23, she is a model, and most importantly, she is better." The silence that fell over the party was heavier than a casket. I stood there, frozen near the dessert table, holding the expensive 3-tier cake I had spent 2 days baking from scratch. The frosting was melting slightly onto my fingers, sticky and sweet, a sickening contrast to the bile rising in my throat. My husband, Mark, was sitting in the guest of honor chair, a throne I had rented for him. It was his 35th birthday. I waited. In those agonizing seconds, I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to be the man I thought I married. I waited for him to snatch the microphone from his mother's hand, to tell her to get out, to defend the woman who had paid off his student loans, nursed him through severe depression, and built this entire life with him brick by brick. But Mark didn't stand up. He didn't look angry. He looked at Tiffany, the blonde, statuesque woman standing next to his mother in a dress that cost more than my car, and he smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It was a sheepish, intrigued, hungry smile. He looked like a child who had just been handed a shiny new toy, and I was the old, broken doll being tossed into the trash without a second thought. "Happy birthday, son, my mother-in-law Barbara," cooed into the mic, placing a manicured hand on Tiffany's back and pushing her gently toward him. "I thought it was time you had a gift that actually matched your potential. Out with the old, drab furniture, and in with the new luxury." She looked directly at me when she said old, drab furniture. Her eyes were cold, dead things, glittering with triumph. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The humiliation wasn't just a slap. It was a public execution. I looked around the garden. Our friends, his colleagues, the neighbors who borrowed sugar from me, they were all staring, some with pity, some with shock, mouth agape, but nobody said a word. The air felt thin, suffocating, scented with barbecue smoke and expensive perfume. I gently placed the heavy cake on the side table. My hands were shaking so violently that the cake stand rattled against the wood. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Not yet. Inside my chest, a switch had been flipped. The part of me that desperately wanted their approval, the part that had spent a decade begging for scraps of affection, just died, and something cold, hard, and dangerous took its place. "Thank you, Barbara," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor blade. "You're right. Mark does deserve exactly what he earns." I turned my back on them. I walked away from the party that I had paid for, leaving my husband ogling his birthday present. I could hear the murmurs starting behind me, the nervous laughter. They thought I was walking away in defeat. They thought I was running to the bedroom to cry into my pillow and wait for an apology that would never come. They were wrong. I wasn't going to the bedroom. I was going to his office. I was going to the safe. And inside that safe was a document that Barbara had forgotten about. A document that would turn their upgrade into a nightmare they would never wake up from. To understand why I destroyed them so completely that day, you have to understand that this wasn't a sudden event. This was the finale of a 10-year war. My name is Elena, and for a decade I was a prisoner in a cell built by my husband's indifference and guarded by his mother's malice. 10 years ago, I was a different person. I was vibrant, ambitious, and deeply in love. When I met Mark, he was charming but broken. He was a struggling architect with a mountain of debt and a complex relationship with his mother. I thought I was his partner. I didn't realize I was just his resource. I should have seen the red flags on our first dinner date with Barbara. We met at a high-end French restaurant downtown. I was wearing a blue dress I had saved up for weeks to buy. I felt beautiful. Mark held my hand across the table, looking at me like I was the only woman in the world. Then Barbara walked in. She didn't look like a mother greeting her son's girlfriend. She looked like a CEO arriving to liquidate a company. She wore Chanel from head to toe and a scowl that could curdle milk. She didn't hug Mark. She inspected him, picking a piece of invisible lint off his jacket with a look of disgust. Then she turned her laser gaze to me. "So," she said, not bothering to sit down yet, "this is the graphic designer? Mark tells me you didn't go to an Ivy League school." "I went to State," I said, smiling, trying to be polite, ignoring the knot forming in my stomach. "I had a full scholarship." "Scholarship," she sniffed, finally sitting down and opening the menu as if I were a bad smell drifting from the kitchen. That means poor. Mark, darling, are you sure you want to attach yourself to someone with baggage? You need someone who can elevate you, not drag you down to the bargain bin. Mark laughed nervously. Mom, stop it. Alina is great. Great is the enemy of exceptional, she muttered, snapping her fingers for a waiter without making eye contact. That was the tone for the next decade. Scholarship trash. Bargain bin. Placeholder. But words I could handle. It was the financial abuse that nearly killed me. 6 months after we got married, Mark came to me with tears in his eyes. He looked so vulnerable, so scared, pacing our tiny living room floor until he wore a path in the rug. Mum is in trouble, he said, his voice cracking. She made a bad investment. She's going to lose her condo. Elena, we have to help her. It's just a loan. $50,000. I hesitated. I felt a cold chill. That was our down payment money for a house. The money I had worked double shifts for. The money that represented our future children, our stability, our escape from renting, Mark... That's everything we have, I whispered. If we give her that, we are back to zero. She's my mother, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. It was the first time I saw his true face, the anger that lurked beneath the charm. She sacrificed everything for me. Are you that selfish? Are you really the gold digger she says you are? The guilt trip worked. It always worked. I broke down. I signed the check. I gave Barbara our future house to save her condo. And what did she do? 2 weeks later, she posted photos on Facebook. She wasn't paying off a debt. She was on a luxury cruise in the Mediterranean. She bought a new car. She was drinking champagne and laughing in the sun while I was eating instant noodles to make rent. When I showed Mark the photos, shaking with rage, showing him the timestamps, he just shrugged. He didn't even look up from his phone. She needed a break to recover from the stress of the near bankruptcy. Elena, stop counting her pennies. You're so petty. It's unattractive. Petty. I was petty for working 60 hours a week while his mother drank champagne on my dime. Over the years, the dynamic solidified into concrete. I was the mule. I worked, I cleaned, I cooked, I managed Mark's life. Mark was the prince who couldn't be stressed, and Barbara was the queen who critiqued the castle I built. She had a key to our house. She would come in while I was at work and rearrange things. I'd come home to find my clothes in trash bags on the porch. I was just helping you declutter, she'd say, sitting on my sofa, eating my food, watching my TV. These clothes looked cheap. I did you a favor. Now Mark doesn't have to look at you in those rags. I'd look at Mark, begging him with my eyes to say something, to defend me. He would just turn up the TV volume. Don't start a fight, Alina, he'd say without looking at me. Mum is just trying to help. You have no fashion sense anyway. I slowly became a shell. I stopped seeing my friends because I was ashamed of my life. I stopped visiting my family because Mark said they were too loud. I was isolated, I was exhausted, and I was financing their lifestyle. I thought if I just tried harder, if I threw the perfect party, cooked the perfect meal, lost 10 pounds, they would finally accept me. That brings us to the birthday party. Mark had been distant for months. He was hiding his phone. He was coming home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine, something floral and expensive. He claimed he was working on a big project, that he was building our future. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him because the alternative was admitting that I had wasted 10 years of my life on a lie. So I decided to throw him the ultimate 35th birthday party. I emptied my personal savings. Account, the secret one I started after the $50,000 incident, to rent tents, caterers, and buy him a vintage Rolex. I worked for 3 days straight preparing the house. I scrubbed the floors until my knees bled. I wanted everything to be perfect. Barbara arrived an hour early. She walked into the kitchen where I was icing the cake. She looked around with a sneer, running a finger over the counter to check for dust. It looks homemade, she sneered, poking the frosting with a manicured nail. It is, I said proudly, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. It's Mark's favorite. Carrot cake. Mark hates carrot cake, she lied, her eyes gleaming with malice. He only eats it to be polite because he pities you. Just like he stays in this marriage. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of mints and venom. But don't worry, Elena, I got him a real gift this year. A gift that will solve his Elena problem once and for all. I didn't know what she meant. I thought she meant a car, or maybe a vacation ticket. I didn't know she meant a human being. I watched her walk out to the garden, laughing into her phone. Yes, bring her in now. The mouse is in the trap. I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. I knew something bad was coming. But I didn't know that in less than an hour, my entire life would be incinerated in front of everyone I knew. I walked out with the cake, singing happy birthday, trying to be the good wife one last time. And then Barbara took the microphone. And then she introduced Tiffany. And now, as I walked toward the house, leaving the party behind, the sounds of celebration fading, I wasn't crying. I was calculating. Mark thought he was the king. Barbara thought she was the kingmaker. But they forgot who paid the mortgage. They forgot who handled the taxes. And they definitely forgot about the prenup that Mark had insisted on signing 10 years ago because he thought he would be the rich one. I walked into his office. The room smelled of cedar and the expensive scotch I bought him. I locked the door behind me. I could still hear the party outside, the laughter, the music, the sound of my husband getting to know his new gift. I walked over to the large painting of a ship on the wall and swung it open. Behind it was the safe. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. Click. I opened the heavy metal door. There it was, the prenup. But next to it was something I hadn't looked for in years. A red folder. Mark's private file. He told me it was just old blueprints. My hand hovered over it. I was looking for financial documents to kick them out, but something in my gut told me to open the red folder first. My intuition was screaming, a high-pitched alarm in my brain. I opened it, and the first thing I saw made me gasp so loud I had to cover my mouth with my hand to stop from screaming. It wasn't just a mistress, it was worse. The folder contained photos of Tiffany, but they weren't new. There were photos of Tiffany from 2 years ago, photos of Tiffany on a boat, photos of Tiffany ... with Barbara, and then the bank statements. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers, my brain struggling to process the betrayal. Monthly transfers of $3,000 from our joint account labeled consulting fees, going directly to an account named Tiffany Mills. My husband hadn't just met her today, and Barbara hadn't just found her. They had been paying her. My husband had been keeping a mistress on my salary for 2 years, and his mother was the one managing the payroll. I sank into the leather chair, clutching the papers. The betrayal was so deep it felt physical, like my bones were breaking one by one. They had been laughing at me for years. Every time I paid a bill, every time I worked late, every time I ate leftovers so Mark could have steak, I was funding his affair. But then, I saw the last document in the stack, a lease agreement for an apartment downtown. In Mark's name? Wait, if Mark had an apartment, why was he living here? Why was he making me pay the mortgage on this house if he had a bachelor pad? I read the lease. The tenant listed wasn't Tiffany. The tenant listed was Mark and Elena Reynolds. My name was on the lease, but I had never signed it. I looked closer at the signature at the bottom. It was my name, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was a forgery, and it was a bad one. I realized then that this wasn't just adultery. This was fraud, identity theft. Mark had used my credit, my name, my identity to rent a luxury apartment for his mistress. He was destroying my credit score to build a love nest for another woman. If you think this is bad, hit the like button, because I was about to find out that the apartment was just the tip of the iceberg. I reached deeper into the folder and pulled out a life insurance policy. I scanned the document. It was taken out 6 months ago. The insured person was me. The beneficiary? Mark Reynolds. The payout? $2 million. My hands went cold. I stopped breathing. I read the fine print. It was a policy that paid out double in case of accidental death. I thought about the accidents I'd had lately. The brakes on my car feeling loose last month. The time I felt dizzy after drinking the tea Mark made me. The time he insisted we go hiking on that dangerous trail even though it was raining. They weren't just stealing from me. They were planning to cash me out. I looked at the camera monitor on the desk. The party was still going. Mark was now dancing with Tiffany, his hands on her waist. Barbara was clapping, looking like the proudest mother in the world. They looked so happy. They looked so victorious. They had no idea that the mouse wasn't in the trap. The mouse had just become the exterminator. I took out my phone. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. I called the one person who hates Barbara almost as much as I do. Her ex-husband. My father-in-law, George. George had been pushed out of the family years ago by Barbara's lies. He was a forensic accountant for the FBI. Elena, he answered, sounding surprised. Is everything okay? Why are you calling me? No, George, I said, my voice cold and steady. I need you to come over right now and bring your laptop. I think your son and your ex-wife are running a money laundering scheme and insurance fraud through my bank account. And I have the proof. I hung up the phone. I wiped a single tear from my cheek. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the party. Happy birthday, Mark, I whispered to the glass. I hope you enjoy your gift. Because tomorrow, you're not going to be blowing out candles. You're going to be calling a bail bondsman. But before I could enact my plan, the door handle to the office jiggled. Someone was trying to get in. Alina? It was Mark's voice. Alina, open the door. Mum says you're hogging the good scotch. Open up! I froze. The papers were spread all over the desk. If he saw them, he would know I knew. And if he knew I knew about the insurance policy, I might not make it out of this room alive. I scrambled to hide the papers, my heart pounding in my ears like a war drum. Just a second, I yelled, my voice cracking. Open it now, he shouted, and then he slammed his body against the door. The wood splintered. He was breaking in. Open it now, Mark shouted again, his fist pounding against the heavy oak door. My heart hammered against my ribs, but the panic that had nearly paralyzed me a moment ago crystallized into something cold and sharp. Survival instinct took over. Didn't have time to be the victim anymore. I looked at the desk, the red folder, the photos of Tiffany, the forged lease. As if he saw these, he would know the game was up. And if he knew I knew, he would cover his tracks. He would hide the money. He would destroy the evidence. I needed time. I needed to be smarter than them. I grabbed the stack of papers. There was no time to use the safe. I dropped to my knees and shoved the red folder underneath the heavy Persian rug, kicking the corner flat just as the lock clicked. I messed up my hair, rubbed my eyes until they were red and puffy. I slumped into the leather chair, looking not like a woman who had just discovered a criminal conspiracy, but like a broken, jealous wife. Ah! Mark burst in. He stumbled slightly, the smell of scotch and expensive cologne wafting off him in waves. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, before landing on me. What is wrong with you? He slurred, loosening his tie. Why is the door locked? Mum says you're in here pouting. God, you are such a killjoy. He scanned the desk. It was empty. He scanned the safe. It was closed. He relaxed, his shoulders dropping. He didn't suspect I knew. He just thought I was pathetic. I wasn't pouting, I said, forcing a tremor into my voice. I was just feeling overwhelmed. The party, the people. It's too much, Mark. Mark rolled his eyes, a cruel laugh bubbling up from his chest. He walked over to the minibar in the corner and poured himself another drink. Overwhelmed, he mocked. That is so typical. You know, Tiffany doesn't get overwhelmed. She loves a crowd. She lights up a room. You just suck the air out of it. He took a swig of the amber liquid and pointed a finger at me. Fix your face. Come back outside. Mum wants to cut the cake. And if you aren't there, standing next to me like a good little wife, people will talk. And I hate it when people talk. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open. I sat there for a moment in the silence of the office. The old Elena would have cried. The old Elena would have begged for his forgiveness. But the old Elena died the moment she saw that forged lease. I stood up. I walked to the mirror hanging on the wall. I smoothed my hair. I fixed my lipstick. I looked into my own eyes. Showtime, I whispered. I walked back out to the garden. The party was in full swing. The band was playing a jazz cover of a pop song. People were laughing, drinking, eating the food I had paid for, and there, in the center of it all, was Barbara. She was holding court, surrounded by a group of women, with Tiffany standing right next to her. They looked like a queen and her princess. When Barbara saw me approaching, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, look who decided to join us," Barbara announced loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Feeling better, dear? Do you need to go lie down again?" "I'm fine, Barbara," I said, stepping up to Mark's side. I slipped my arm through his. I felt him tense up, recoiling from my touch, but I held on tight. I just needed a moment to appreciate how wonderful this evening is. I looked at Tiffany. Up close, she was flawless. Young, beautiful, and she was looking at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. She knew. She knew she was winning. "Hi," Tiffany said, her voice light and airy. I'm Tiffany. Mark has told me so much about you. I bet he has, I said, smiling until my cheeks hurt. He's told me absolutely nothing about you. You're a colleague. Something like that, Tiffany giggled, glancing at Barbara. Tiffany is a consultant, Barbara interjected smoothly. She's helping Mark with his new expansion. Expansion, I repeated. That sounds expensive. Growth always is, Mark said, pulling his arm away from me. Now let's cut the cake. I'm starving. I stood there and watched them cut the cake. I watched Mark feed the first slice to his mother and the second slice to Tiffany. I stood in the background, a ghost at my own party, smiling, clapping, playing the part. But my mind was racing. I was memorizing faces. I was listening to snippets of conversation. I was counting the champagne bottles. I wasn't just a wife anymore, I was a spy. The party finally ended at 1 a.m. The last guests stumbled out. Tiffany lingered, whispering something in Mark's ear that made him laugh, before kissing Barbara on the cheek and leaving in an Uber. When the door finally closed, the silence in the house was deafening. I'm exhausted, Mark announced, not looking at me. I'm sleeping in the guest room. Your snoring has been getting worse lately. I didn't snore. It was just another lie. Another excuse to stay away from me. Okay, I said. Good night, Mark. I waited upstairs in the dark. I waited until 3 a.m. I waited until the rhythm of his breathing down the hall was heavy and deep. Then I went back downstairs. I retrieved the red folder from under the rug. I didn't turn on the lights. I used the flashlight on my phone. I took photos of every single document. The lease, the bank transfers, the photos of them together. I uploaded them immediately to a hidden cloud account. Then I put everything back exactly how I found it. I put the folder back in the safe. I wiped my fingerprints off the dial. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. Mark was an architect, but Barbara ... Barbara was the mastermind. She knew how to hide money. I needed someone who knew how to find it. I went to the kitchen and dialed the one number I knew by heart, even though I hadn't called it in 5 years. Hello? A gruff, sleepy voice answered on the third ring. George? I whispered. It's Elena. There was a pause. George Reynolds. Mark's father. Barbara's ex-husband. The man Barbara had destroyed and alienated from his own son. He was a forensic accountant who had retired to a cabin upstate to get away from her toxicity. Elena. He sounded awake now. Is everything all right? It's 3 a.m. No, George, I said, clutching the phone. Nothing is all right. Mark and Barbara, they've done something big. I think they're stealing everything. Start from the beginning, he said. I told him everything. The party, the introduction of Tiffany, the red folder, the forged lease, the payments labeled consulting fees. When I mentioned the amounts, George let out a low whistle. Elena, he said, his voice grave. That doesn't sound like a simple affair. If Barbara is moving that kind of money through your joint accounts and creating shell entities for apartments, she's not just funding a mistress, she's washing money. Washing money? Barbara has been trying to play the real estate market for years, George explained. If she's using Mark's account, send your credit to move cash around. She's setting you up. If the IRS looks, whose name is on the tax returns? Mine, I whispered. We filed jointly. Exactly. She's building a nest egg for Mark and his new girlfriend, and she's building a prison cell for you. I felt the room spin. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just leaving me. They were framing me. What do I do, George? Do I call the police? Not yet, George said firmly. If you go to the police now, Barbara will have an explanation. She'll have forged documents saying you approved everything. She'll turn it around on you. You need indisputable proof. You need to catch them in the act. How? You have to stay there, George said. You have to pretend everything is normal. You have to let them think they are winning. Can you do that? Can you look that woman in the eye and smile? I thought about the way Barbara looked at me at the party. The way she called me old furniture. Yes, I said. I can do that. Good. Tomorrow I'm coming to town, George said. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street at noon. Bring copies of everything you found. And Elena, ... check your credit report. Tonight. We hung up. I opened my laptop. I logged into the credit bureau. My hands flew to my mouth. There were 3 mortgages. Not on our house. On 3 different properties I had never seen. There were credit cards maxed out in my name. The total debt was over $4 million. I sat in the dark kitchen. the glow of the screen illuminating the ruin of my life. They had buried me alive. But the next morning, I woke up before Mark. I made coffee. I made pancakes. I put on a nice dress. When Mark walked into the kitchen, hungover and grumpy, I smiled. "Good morning, honey," I said, pouring him a cup. "I was thinking, Barbara was right yesterday." Mark blinked, confused. "She was?" "Yes," I said, turning back to the stove so he couldn't see the cold hatred in my eyes. "We do need to make some changes. I've been so stressed lately. Maybe I haven't been the fun wife you deserve." Mark relaxed. He took a sip of coffee. He looked relieved. He thought his little plan was working. He thought I was broken. "I'm glad you see that, Alina," he said, taking a bite of a pancake. "Mum just wants what's best for us." "I know," I said. "Actually, I was hoping I could take Barbara out for lunch next week to apologize. And maybe we could talk about refinancing the house to free up some cash for your expansion." Mark choked on his coffee. His eyes lit up with greed. "Refinancing? You'd do that?" "Anything for you," I lied. He smiled. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb that had just walked into the slaughterhouse. "I'll set it up," he said. "Mum is going to be so happy." He had no idea. He thought he was getting the money. He didn't know he was handing me the shovel to dig his grave. I left the house at 11:30 a.m. I told him I was going to the grocery store. I drove straight to the diner to meet George. But as I pulled into the parking lot, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our home security system. Motion detected in the office. I opened the app on my phone. The camera feed loaded. It wasn't Mark in the office. It was Barbara. And she wasn't alone. She was with a man I didn't recognize. A man carrying a black medical bag. They were standing over my desk. Barbara was holding a pill bottle. I turned up the volume on my phone. "Are you sure this will look like natural causes?" Barbara asked the man. "Absolutely," the man said. "Cardiac arrest. Untraceable after 4 hours. Just mix it into her food." I dropped the phone. The screen cracked. They weren't just framing me for fraud. They were tired of waiting. They were accelerating the timeline. I looked up and saw George waving from the diner window. I ran inside. "I didn't have time to explain. We have to go," I gasped, grabbing his arm. "Now? Why?" George asked, alarmed. "Because Barbara just hired a hitman," I whispered. "And she's planning to serve me death for dinner." "We can't go to the police," I said, my voice shaking but my hand steady on the steering wheel. "Not yet. If we go now, the hitman disappears. Barbara claims she was just getting a vitamin shot for me. We need the food. We need the actual poison." George looked at me like I was insane. "Alina, you are walking back into a slaughterhouse. They're waiting to kill you. They won't kill me violently," I reasoned, staring at the road ahead. "They want it to look like a heart attack. That means I have to eat or drink something. As long as I don't swallow anything, I'm safe. I need that sample, George. If I can get the poisoned food to a lab, we have attempted murder. That puts them away for life." George gripped the dashboard. He knew I was right, but he hated it. "I'll be in the van down the street," he said. "I'll be watching the feeds. If they touch you, if they even look like they are going to get physical." I'm kicking down the door. I pulled into the driveway. It was 6 p.m. The house looked warm and inviting. Golden light spilled from the windows. It was the perfect picture of domestic bliss, a lie made of bricks and mortar. I took a deep breath, checked the hidden voice recorder taped to my chest under my blouse, and walked to the front door. Unlocked it and stepped inside. "Honey, is that you?" Mark's voice called from the kitchen. He sounded cheerful. Too cheerful. I walked into the kitchen. The scene was almost comical in its normalcy. Mark was wearing an apron over his dress shirt. He was stirring a pot on the stove. The table was set with our best china, candles were flickering, and a bottle of expensive red wine was breathing on the counter. Barbara was sitting at the island, sipping a glass of white wine. She smiled when she saw me. It was a reptilian smile. "There she is!" Barbara exclaimed. "We were getting worried. Mark wanted to make you a special apology dinner." "An apology dinner?" I asked, putting my purse down on the counter, making sure the camera lens hidden in the buckle was facing them. "Oh, the party!" Mark said, turning around. He looked sweaty. His eyes were darting around the room. "I was an arse, Alina. I drank too much. I let the stress of work get to me. I want to make it up to you. It smells." "Delicious!" I lied. The air smelled of heavy cream and mushrooms. A strong smell, perfect for masking the bitter taste of a chemical agent. Mushroom risotto, Mark said proudly. Your favorite. It wasn't my favorite, it was his favorite. I hated mushrooms, but he had never bothered to learn that in 10 years. Sit down, Barbara ushered me to the chair. You look exhausted, dear. You look pale. Doesn't she look pale, Mark? She does, Mark agreed, pouring wine into my glass. You need to eat. You need your strength. I sat down, I looked at the wine. I looked at the risotto Mark was ladling onto my plate. He put a massive portion in front of me. He didn't serve himself. He didn't serve Barbara. Aren't you eating? I asked. Oh, we ate earlier, Barbara lied smoothly. While we were waiting for you. Mark cooked this batch just for you. Fresh, Mark added. Just for you. I looked at the creamy rice. I knew that somewhere in that white sludge was enough potassium chloride or arsenic to stop my heart before dessert. My heart was hammering so hard I thought they could hear it. I had to get this food into a container without them seeing, but they were watching me like hawks. Mark was leaning against the counter, arms crossed. Barbara was sitting right next to me. Eat, Mark urged. It's getting cold. I picked up my fork. I saw Mark's muscles tense. He was anticipating the bite. He was waiting for the end of his problems. I lifted the fork to my mouth. The smell was overpowering. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. Mark jumped. Who is that? I didn't invite anyone, Barbara said, frowning. I'll get it, Mark said, annoyed. Don't start without me, Elena. I want to hear what you think. He walked out of the kitchen toward the front door. Barbara turned in her chair to look down the hallway. This was my chance. I had 3 seconds. I grabbed the Ziploc bag I had hidden in my sleeve. In one fluid motion, I scraped half the risotto from my plate into the bag, sealed it, and shoved it deep into my purse on the floor. Then I smeared the remaining sauce around the plate to make it look like I had eaten. I rubbed a little bit on my lip. I sat back, my heart exploding in my chest. Mark came back into the kitchen. He looked confused. There was nobody there, just a package on the porch. It was a distraction, George. He must have rung the doorbell from his phone app or dropped a box. Bless him. Mark looked at my plate. He saw it was half empty. His eyes lit up. It was the most genuine happiness I'd ever seen on his face. You liked it, he beamed. It was rich, I said, patting my mouth with a napkin. Very rich. I think I ate too fast. Finish it, Barbara said, looking at the plate. There's still some left. I can't, I said, putting a hand to my stomach. I started to act. I let my eyelids droop. I let my breathing get a little shallow. Actually, I don't feel very well. Mark and Barbara exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. What's wrong? Mark asked, stepping closer, feigning concern. Is it your chest? Does your arm hurt? He was checking for heart attack symptoms. Ideally, yes, I thought. Just my stomach, I said aloud. I feel dizzy. Really dizzy. Maybe you should lie down, Barbara suggested, her voice silky. Go upstairs. Mark will help you. I knew what the plan was. Get me upstairs. Let me die in bed. Call 911 in the morning and say I died in my sleep. No, I said, standing up. I swayed a little on purpose. I think I need to go to the urgent care. I might be having an allergic reaction. No, Mark shouted, blocking my path. No doctors. You just need sleep. I'll take you upstairs. Mark, move, I said, letting a little bit of the old Elena panic seep into my voice. I can't breathe. You're staying here. Mark grabbed my arm. His grip was bruising. Let her go, Mark, Barbara said suddenly. Mark looked at his mother. What? Let her go, Barbara repeated. She looked at me with cold calculation. If she drives to the doctor and crashes her car on the way, well, that's an accidental death, isn't it? Double indemnity. Mark's eyes widened. He understood. If I died in a car crash because I was sick, it paid out $4 million instead of $2 million. He let go of my arm. Drive safe, honey, he said. I grabbed my purse, the purse containing the poisoned risotto, and stumbled out the back door. I walked to my car, fumbling with the keys, acting disoriented for their benefit. I got in. I started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw them watching me from the kitchen window. They weren't calling for help. They were waiting for the crash. I drove 2 blocks, turned the corner, and pulled over. George's van was there. I jumped out of my car and ran to his passenger door. I threw the Ziploc bag onto the dashboard. Get this to the lab, I gasped. And get me out of here. George looked at the bag of risotto. Did you eat any? No, I said. But they think I did. They think I'm dying right now. Good, George said, peeling out onto the road. Let's keep them thinking that. We spent the next 3 days in a motel 2 towns over. It was a waiting game. Sent the risotto to a private lab George knew. The results came back in 24 hours. Digitalis, a heart medication. Overdose causes cardiac arrest. Untraceable in a standard autopsy if they aren't looking for it. It was lethal. We had them. We had the recording of the planning. We had the video of Mark serving me. We had the poisoned food. But I wasn't done. Arresting them wasn't enough. I needed to dismantle them. I logged into my social media. I hadn't posted in days. I posted a single status update, visible only to Mark and Barbara, feeling much better after a few days at the spa. So refreshed. Can't wait for the gala on Saturday. I have a big surprise for everyone. We watched the camera feeds from the house. When Mark saw the post, he threw his phone against the wall. "She's alive!" he screamed. "The poison didn't work. You said the dose was lethal. It must have been old." Barbara shrieked back. "Or she threw it up, that idiot." "She's coming to the gala," Mark paced frantically. "She said she has a surprise. What if she knows?" "She doesn't know," Barbara insisted, though she looked terrified. "If she knew, she would have called the police. She's just stupid. She's resilient. She's a cockroach. What do we do?" "We proceed," Barbara said, straightening her jacket. "We go to the gala. We smile. And if she tries to speak, we cut the mic. We discredit her. We tell everyone she's off her meds. We destroy her reputation so thoroughly that even if she goes to the police later, no one will believe her. I watched them on the screen, sipping my coffee in the motel room. They have no idea," I told George. "No," George smiled. "They really don't." Saturday night arrived. The night of the gala. I didn't wear the modest beige dress Barbara had bought me months ago. I went to a boutique. I maxed out the last credit card I had that wasn't joint with Mark. I bought a dress that was red. Blood red. Strapless. Dangerous. I did my hair. I put on makeup that made my eyes look fierce, not tired. George drove me to the Ritz-Carlton. The valet stand was full of luxury cars. The press was there. This was the social event of the season. Barbara's entire reputation was built on this night. I walked into the ballroom. The air smelled of expensive lilies and hypocrisy. 300 people. The mayor, the city council, Mark's boss. And there, at the front of the room, holding court, was Barbara. She was wearing gold lame, looking like a trophy. Mark was beside her, sweating in his tuxedo, his eyes darting around the room nervously. Tiffany was there too, clinging to Mark's arm, looking bored but beautiful. The music stopped when I walked in. The red dress was a beacon. Mark saw me. His jaw dropped. He nudged Barbara. Barbara turned. She saw me. She saw that I wasn't dead. She saw that I wasn't sick. She saw that I looked better than I had in 10 years. I walked straight toward them. The crowd parted for me. I didn't stop until I was standing right in front of the stage where they were receiving guests. "Elena," Mark whispered. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for the party, Mark," I smiled. "And for the surprise." Barbara stepped forward, blocking Mark. "You are not welcome here. Leave. Now. Or I call security." "Go ahead," I said, raising my voice so the nearby guests could hear. "Call then. I think the police are already on their way, actually." Barbara froze. "What?" I stepped around her and walked up the stairs to the stage. The band stopped playing. The room went silent. Barbara lunged for me, grabbing my arm. "Don't you dare!" I leaned in close to her ear. "I have the risotto, Barbara," I whispered. "And I have the lab report." She let go of me as if I were on fire. She stumbled back, her face turning white. I walked to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw George in the back, giving me a thumbs up. I took a deep breath. "Good evening, everyone," I said. "My name is Elena Reynolds. Most of you know me as the quiet wife, the furniture in the background. But tonight I want to tell you a story about love, betrayal, and a very special recipe for mushroom risotto." I signaled to the AV booth. George had hacked into the projector system. The giant screen behind me lit up. It wasn't a charity logo. It was the video of Mark and Barbara in the kitchen. The audio boomed through the ballroom speakers. "Aim for the chest, Mark. Don't miss." The crowd gasped. A glass shattered on the floor. Mark tried to run. He bolted for the side exit. But two police officers were already stepping through the doors, handcuffs ready. I watched him stop. I watched him realize it was over. I turned back to the microphone. "Barbara," I said, "you wanted to upgrade your son's life. Well, I think a prison cell is a significant downgrade from this ballroom, but don't worry. I hear the food there is to die for." The ballroom erupted. It wasn't applause this time. It was a cacophony of gasps, screams, and the frantic clicking of press cameras. The video on the screen froze on Barbara's face, twisted in a snarl, commanding her son to kill me. It was a portrait of evil that no amount of gold lame could hide. Barbara stood frozen on the stage next to me. For the first time in her life, she was speechless. She looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at the police officers marching up the stairs. "It's a deep fake," she shrieked, her voice cracking. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "She manipulated it. She's a graphic designer. She made it up." "We have the original raw files, Mrs. Reynolds," a detective said, stepping onto the stage. He was holding a pair of handcuffs. "And we have the lab report for the risotto found in your kitchen. Digitalis, a lethal dose." Barbara's knees buckled. She didn't faint, she wasn't that delicate, but she slumped against the podium, clutching her chest. I have a heart condition," she gasped, trying one last manipulation. "I need a doctor." "You'll see the prison doctor," the detective said, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. I watched as they dragged her down the stairs. The woman who had terrorized me for 10 years, who had called me trash, who had tried to steal my parents' home. She looked small, she looked old, and she looked terrified. Across the room, Mark was already in cuffs. He was crying loudly, snot running down his face, begging the officers to listen. "It was her idea," Mark screamed, pointing at his mother. "She made me do it. I didn't want to. I just wanted the money." "You're a coward, Mark," Barbara yelled back at him as they were led past each other. "I should have had a daughter." I stood center stage, watching them be hauled away like garbage. I looked for Tiffany. I saw the back of her red dress as she sprinted out the side exit, disappearing into the night. She knew the money train had just derailed. She wouldn't be visiting Mark in prison. George walked up the stairs and stood next to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. "It's done," he said quietly. "Not yet," I whispered. I leaned into the microphone one last time. "To the IRS agents in the room," I said, looking directly at the city council members who had helped Barbara hide her assets. "My father-in-law has a USB drive with the complete ledger of Blue Jay Holdings. I suggest you check your own books." The panic in the room was palpable. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a satisfying thud. I walked off the stage, past the shocked socialites, past the flashing cameras, and out into the night air. It smelled of rain and justice. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, but this time I wasn't the victim. I was the star witness. The evidence George and I had gathered was bulletproof. The video, the audio, the financial records, the poisoned risotto. Their defense attorneys tried to argue entrapment. But the judge's stern woman, who seemed particularly disgusted by Mark, wasn't having it. Mark took a plea deal to testify against his mother. He got 20 years for attempted murder, fraud, and identity theft. I went to his sentencing. He looked at me from the defendant's table, his eyes hollow. He mouthed the word, "sorry." I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just looked through him like he was a pane of glass. Barbara refused to plead guilty. She went to trial. It was a spectacle. She fired 3 lawyers. She screamed at the jury. In the end, it took them less than 2 hours to convict her on all counts. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called her a danger to society and a stain on the concept of motherhood. As for the money, the IRS seized everything. Barbara's condo, Mark's car, the shell company's assets. But because George had flagged the fraud early, and because I had cooperated fully, they unwound the mortgages on my parents' house. My parents were safe. Their home was secure. The insurance policy was voided, of course. But I didn't need it. I sued Mark and Barbara for emotional distress, fraud, and attempted bodily harm. Since their assets were seized, I didn't get millions, but I got something better. I got the rights to their story. A production company approached me a month after the trial. They wanted to make a docuseries about the birthday party murder plot. I signed the contract. The advance check was enough to pay off my student loans, buy a new car, a reliable one, not a Range Rover, and start my own graphic design firm. I moved out of the city. I bought a small house near George's cabin. We have Sunday dinner every week. He's the father Mark never deserved, and the father I always needed. Sometimes I look at the old photos. I see the tired, scared woman standing in the background holding a cake, waiting for approval. She's gone now. I went to visit Mark in prison once, a year later. Not to forgive him, just to see. He sat behind the glass looking thin and grey. He was working in the prison laundry. "Elena," he said, picking up the phone. "I miss you. I miss your cooking. The food here is terrible." I smiled. A genuine, bright smile. "I bet it is," I said. "But don't worry, Mark. I heard they're serving mushroom risotto in the cafeteria today. You should try it. It's to die for." I hung up the phone and walked out into the sunshine. I got into my car, turned up the music, and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I had no reason to look back. My life was finally in front of me. If you enjoyed seeing karma served cold, please subscribe and hit the like button. And if you think my mother-in-law was bad, wait until you hear the story on your screen right now. It's about a bride who found out her fiancé bet his groomsman $10,000 that she would say, "I do," even if he showed up drunk. You won't believe what she did at the altar. Click now.